Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show, the podcast by investors for investors.
Okay, how you going? Smart Property Investment Show. Welcome. Recording literally hours before the Reserve Bank of Australia meets on its June meeting. They've been the RBA board has been in meetings for the last 2 days, Monday and Tuesday now, under this new regime, working out what they're going to do with interest rates. And we're about to hear, come 2:30, I believe, by memory, whether or not the RBA will raise rates. The information coming into my inbox this morning pretty much says that there won't be a rate rise. But I have been reading a lot of stuff in the papers and don't expect a rate cut at any point soon. ANZ only came out over the weekend, or this week actually, saying that they're not forecasting a rate reduction on the official cash rate until February of 2025, and then they're saying there'll be another cut potentially in April, and then another cut in that final quarter of 2025, whereas the other major banks are still saying that there may be a rate cut this year in November. I don't know. I'm just but a humble podcaster. I bring people in the studio who should know more than me. Well, they do, which is pretty cool. One of them is Lachlan Vidler, director at Atlas Property Group, back in the studio, giving us an update, what he's seeing, what he's up to, and how the world's treating him. Lachlan, how you going?
Good morning, Phil. Good.
What's been happening?
What's been happening?
Yeah. I saw you the other week.
You did. The
wearing our tuxedos.
Yeah, nice to get the penguin suit on, right?
Yeah.
That was the PIP Awards night. That was great.
Inaugural awards.
It was a good night. As one of the board members on there, it was great to see such a good turnout. I think we had 90, 100 people there here in Sydney at the Ivy Ballroom.
Bit glamorous.
Was glamorous. No, I feel like it's always nice. We see people around. People might be a bit casual. People might be dressed up a bit. But then when you get into an event like that, it's great because everyone's dressed up. Everyone's looking their best. Everyone's feeling good. It's a good atmosphere. Like I think, there's nothing negative about an awards night. People are just like people there because they're
unless
excited.
you don't win an award, then sometimes people tip a table over and start kicking down doors.
Absolutely,
it doesn't happen all the time. But
absolutely,
no, it was good and well done to you and the PIP team, the board and the relevant people. That's the Property Investment Professionals Australia. I was on that board for, 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
It's a rite of passage for anyone who actually cares about property and property investment in Australia.
Absolutely. I think, at the end of the day, I think as most people in the industry are good operators and they want to be good operators. And, an organisation like PIPA is just there to try and help people educate themselves more, help professionals increase their own knowledge, and then also lobby and advocate on behalf of property investors and property investment professionals to the government. And people was big at lobbying the Queensland state government. What was it, last year when they were trying to bring in those land tax changes? Yeah. PIPA was getting in front of all the politicians in Queensland, and they were a big part of repealing that change in the tax law. Yeah,
and this happens, and for a lot of you out there who are property investors, it's still unregulated, the advice connected with property investment. So PIP are doing a lot of work with the code of conduct, and those people that subscribe into memberships are subscribing to that code of conduct. So you would like to think that people who are a PIPA member are doing the right things. And let's be honest, some people still do the wrong thing in property, only a handful of people, but it does happen. So if you see the PIPA logo on anyone that you're working with, it's safe to assume that they do subscribe into a code of conduct. And eventually in time, and they're still trying to work it out, there will be some level of regulation around that, but who knows if and when that will happen. And it's going to be a tough one to work out. But speaking of lobbying, PICA, the Property Investment
Council,
Consumers of Australia, Council.
I think it's probably the Council of Australia.
Sorry, right. Yeah. Speaking of lobbying, also that's side by side. I had a chat with their chairman the other day, Ben Kingsley. Who would you know? I sat on the board of PIPA with many years, talking about much like PIPA advocating for changes to those what Queensland was up to, these no grounds evictions in New South Wales, and mate. They're just taxing property investors all over the place, and they're putting rules in front of them. Is that turning off people from property investment? Are you seeing it in your client base?
I would say not in our client base, but I'd say we speak with probably we would speak with I don't even know. I'm trying to think of the number here. 100 to 200 potential clients a week, right? And obviously not all of them will even buy a property, let alone come and work with us. Of course, the smart ones come and work with us.
Yeah,
but,
I'm sure they do.
But no, I think from our for your question from the client base, no. But in the conversations with people who often are the ones I actually see who don't go and take action to then invest, are the people who are always looking for a reason not to. And I'd say that's a big part. And I mean, we just saw New South Wales state government, I think it was yesterday or the day before, announced the fact that they are going to hold the land tax threshold rate on property or land values instead of continuing to index it, which is what they have been doing. So they said that next year, it might be this coming financial year we're about to switch into, the current rate sits at like 1 million and a little bit of change, is going to stay still rather than index.
Okay, I missed this.
Yeah,
completely.
did you miss that? Yeah, it was like yesterday or the day before.
So they're not going to be increasing the value of land? Or?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. So they're not going to increase the threshold. So it means that with the rate that property's obviously increasing, it's going to bring more people into that land tax.
It's under $1 million, right?
It's like just ticked over.
It just tipped over.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got the phone here. Anyone who's watching the video could see me.
So these are essentially for property investors who hold property in their personal name. The threshold for paying land tax.
Yeah. So here you go. I got it.
It's not going to go up in line with the. So they're just more. They're going to generate more tax
revenue.
because valuation is going to. This is land value.
This is land value. Yeah. So New South Wales government set to announce the threshold at which land tax are triggered will be frozen at 1.075 million.
Okay.
So it's and their whole rationale, they are being smart about it. Is they're saying that there's only one other state. It might be I'm thinking maybe Queensland or SA. One of them. I could be wrong, but they said on the article I read, only one other state doesn't. So only one other state will be left indexing the threshold each year.
But that's not a reason to do it.
I agree, but that's but that's how they're going to try and increase whip the votes for the election that will of course be coming soon enough for New South Wales.
So anyone that holds real estate in New South Wales outside of personal name, doesn't matter anyway because you pay land tax on it. If it's held in your personal name and not your principal place of residence, the value of where you're taxed and not taxed is not going to rise in line with the value of land. I looked at, and do yourself a favour if you pay land tax, look at how quickly your land values are going up in certain areas and states. And, what's the easiest way? And, every now and then, like beating up state governments in particular, they sit there and go, and I know that there was a huge GST error or something in New South Wales budgets where they underestimated or overestimated by $12 or $13 billion, right? How do you raise more money, right? Let's look at a budget. It's really simple.
You just tax more.
You just tax more. So most people with a family budget, it's money you bring in and then the money goes out. And anyone who's a property investor should run a good budget. If you're a state government, the way you generate money is through taxation and fines, right?
Yep.
That's how you do it.
Yeah,
so typically, how do you get more money coming in? You tax people more or you fine people more? And how do you curb money going out? You spend your money more effectively. Often they don't spend their money very effectively, and they're usually in a deficit, right? Run on the surplus, and therefore they borrow money and all goes wrong. So what's the easiest way to raise more revenue? You go, even though property is going up in value all over the place, for the purpose of taxing people, we're not going to assume that. We're going to say it's static and stays the same. So over time, people are going to tick over into this belt above that 1 million whatever, and they're going to have to start paying land tax.
Yeah.
What a way to disincentivize property investment.
Yeah, well, and you know what? They'll do it. They'll probably do it under the guise of, it's gonna help somehow home ownership rates because people won't invest as much, which already hurts because the rental market is so critically short, and it will continue to disenfranchise people. And ironically, I guess state governments don't really care about it, but ironically, by disincentivizing people to go and create their own wealth, all that they're doing is pushing the bucket down the road for the federal government when it comes to pensions.
Yep.
And we're already going to face it's already there's a lot of articles out there and a lot of research into it. We're already going to face, especially over the next probably 15 to 20 years, a very big issue of an aging population and people who don't have enough money saved. And a lot of the generation who are about to retire haven't experienced the full employment cycle of superannuation. So there's going to be a lot more pensions required. NDIS is one of the biggest drains on federal government funds. That's going to continue getting worse. So by disincentivizing people from creating their own wealth, all that they're doing is kicking the can up to the federal government. And to me, considering most, federal government's obviously Labor, most state governments are also Labor right now, you'd think there'd be a little bit more of a conversation going on between them of let's maybe try to balance these books a bit.
I reckon it's a moment in time at the moment, not to get too political, but I note that Peter Dutton's now the preferred Prime Minister in the polls.
Is he?
Just happened this week, and the LNP, the coalition now is the preferred party. So,
wow.
It's not very often that you only get a one-term government, but things are changing rapidly. So hold on, everyone. What you can't do is change what happens in politics, but it's a core issue because if you disincentivize people to transact property, right, and this might be a disincentivization for property investors might just go somewhere else and they can stay under that threshold, right, in many of the other places, many of the other states, right? So you're just going to push the money somewhere else, fair enough.
Yeah.
It's going to disincentivize New South Wales investments. But if people aren't transacting, one of the key issues in terms of a big component of tax receipts is stamp duty.
Yeah.
So if there's less transactions, there's less money coming in to the government. It's really, really simple. And also, if the idea of this is to try and make housing more affordable, a third of Australians rent, right?
Yep.
Probably, it's a blanket statement, and I'm sure there's some economists that could argue against it, but a third of Australians rent. Probably, if you change everything, a third of Australians will still rent. Because a third of Australians can't raise a deposit to buy a house. They might not want to rent. They might be in a transient relationship. They might not be able to get a mortgage, all this sort of stuff, right? So rental accommodation needs to be provided. Be very, very careful, governments, what you're doing. But
it's a good point, though. But I think the other side of the coin is that even if some of the I honestly cannot name one sitting here, but the Greens, again, not to get political, but the Greens have some wild housing policies, right? Yeah. And I would love to see the economics, the modelling behind some of the things that the Greens, especially at a federal level, come out with. But putting that aside, if you go and do some of the most wild policies that are being proposed, the reality is that even dropping a third of the value of properties around the place isn't going to solve the issue for most people who are trying to get into a home, where they already have issues trying to save money. They already have issues with, income levels in general. So not the saving side, but income levels in general. You've got issues with a critical shortage of properties for starters. So that's already going to, even some of those wild policies are going to make it hard to drop that value anyway. Yeah. But you've already got a very small pool of people fighting over it. So by trying to enact some of these things that disenfranchise investors and disincentivize investment, it's not going to actually help the way that people think it's going to help, because we're not in that sort of a circumstance, right? It's not like we have excess supply. It's not like we've got, really, like builders. Builders cannot, and developers cannot construct dwellings right now because the margins were so wafer thin at the best of times that now that like you can't get it done, and it's a wicked problem right now. It's a wicked problem.
Yeah, that's right. Just tax property investors.
Well, that's it, right?
That's how you fix everything. Tax property investors. They're rich. They're wealthy.
Exactly. Yeah. You know what? Property. Yeah. There's 71% of people who own one or two, or 71% of property investors who own their one or two properties. Yeah. They're the wealthy, right?
Yeah,
that's what we all get told.
Yeah. Anyway, but we digress.
We do, guys.
So what's got interest rates on hold today?
Yeah, I'm picking a hold. I'd be very disappointed if they did push it up. I think the unfortunate thing from what I see, because I look at, I go through and analyze, and on the Atlas Property Group socials, like our Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and everything, I pull apart every RBA set of minutes and sort of what goes on in the decision. More so the decision on the day rather than going back retrospectively to the minutes. So I'll be doing that later this afternoon. But
Great.
I think I actually almost feel sorry for the RBA because there's some numbers that would, in isolation, make, I would think, the RBA go, we should push up rates, right?
Some of the inflation sort of went up a very small amount sort of this month versus last month. Annualizes, what, 3.6?
6, yeah, that was the last number I saw, yeah.
So, up from 3.5. But GDP growth is 0.1%. So we're essentially effectively in a recession.
And that's what I mean. You got a lot of things that say we should hold or actually cut. You've got a few little measures, for example, inflation, that go, okay, maybe there's a minor argument to increase. But I think, and this is, I might have my finance degree and all that, and and study the property markets, but I would still say that this is probably not as educated. I'm not an economist by any stretch. I think that from what I analyze and see, if they were to increase, it is going to have such a significantly catastrophic impact. Like it's going to go so much further than what they actually intend it to, rather than keeping on hold and letting just sort of the steam continue to erode naturally, even if it's a bit slower than they want, but let it go naturally. If they cut, I think it is a bit early in the cycle to cut. I think that it's just with how some of those measures have gone, it would be very challenging. It probably would, almost like a fire that's almost burnt out and they just throw a little bit more kindling on top and it sort of reignites.
When was the last rise? It was November, wasn't it? November,
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Melbourne Cup days when everyone went, there's one too far. But
yeah.
Look, you're better off maybe going one hike too many and bringing it back sooner rather than letting it stew and propagate. But anyway, we are armchair economists.
We are armchair or new table, as is in the podcast room.
Yes, I know. Well, this is where it is, right? It's walnut solid. Welcome back, Phil Tarrant from Smart Property Investment, chatting with Lachlan Vidler at Atlas Property Group, good friend of the Smart Property Investment Show. We get him on every now and then. I want to ask you about the market, but beforehand, Talva.
Yes.
What's going on with Talva?
Talva. So, I mean, I'm sure everybody listening has heard me talking about it for the last, probably the last 6 to 12 months, really. It's gone great. It's Talva, Talvr. I'm still in the habit of sort of spelling it out. It's one of those nice little techie names. But Talva, doing really well. So as everyone knows, I've gone out and completely...
You're a prop tech entrepreneur now.
Exactly right.
Yes.
Prop tech entrepreneur. It's got a nice ring to it, doesn't it? But no, we're out there.
By the way, prop tech entrepreneur means you spend a lot of money, typically.
Exactly right. Yeah.
There's a hot tip for you.
It's a hole that's never quite filled. But no, over at Talva, what we're doing is, we've built out portfolio management software. So it's all about getting investors on the platform rather than trying to have people stuck in Microsoft Excel where, a lot of people don't even know how to use Excel. Maybe they don't have the knowledge on how to properly break down and analyze their investments. Get them onto Talva, and we do that all for you. You get valuations every month on your property. You can manage your expenses, manage your tax, do all that sort of stuff from the property side. So it's really great. And to answer your question, how it's going, it's awesome. It's we've now got sort of thousands of people, thousands of properties on there, getting amazing feedback. Pretty much each week now. We've kind of got that volume of people on there that we're getting feedback each week on, what's going really well, features that people want. And I'm hoping in the next month or two, we're actually going to release our business product. So businesses are going to be able to come on and manage their clients through that, not as like a CRM, but as like a, after you've serviced a client.
Like a portfolio management
Exactly
tool.
right, and then that way the client still feels like they're in touch with the professional that's helped them. Professional can still manage that relationship, and it's gonna be fantastic. So we're about a month or two away from releasing.
Sounds like Talva needs to sponsor PIPA.
Maybe.
Yeah, there you go.
Maybe.
That's for property investment professionals, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right.
That's cool. So what's the URL again?
Talva, so talvr.com or .com.au, both work. So make sure you jump on. Free to use. Free
is good.
Absolutely. So jump on and grab those portfolio insights that most people probably aren't using. And I guess a bit of our ethos is we want to use the insights out of the platform that people are going to get to help them break that barrier from being only one or two properties, maybe because they sort of mismanage it or they don't track the performance well enough. Be part of that group that breaks the threshold and gets into their third or higher investment property. Really grow that wealth.
And every single person who within Spark Property Investment Lease, I don't know many of them go, I just want to buy one investment property. They buy one as a start, then they go, what's next?
Exactly
and
right.
this is the reason why so many people tune into this, because pretty much everything we chat about, over 1,000 episodes.
Yeah.
If you want to learn about property, go and listen to 1,000 episodes of the Smart Property Investment Show.
Yeah.
And you'll most likely be one of those people that just don't buy one or two properties if that's what you want to do.
That's it.
That's what you want to do. Now, part of my job is podcasting, and it feels as though I just podcast with podcasters. There's, it's a rapidly growing area, property podcasts, because these people who are looking to invest and create wealth, they're sponges for information. You've just launched your own.
Yeah, I've just launched one. Yeah, so the Property Investment Australia podcast, and I do have a co-host with me, and he's one of Aussie's top mortgage brokers.
Okay,
his name's Will Sanchez.
Will Sanchez.
Yeah, he runs Aussie Newtown here in Sydney. I've known him for years, and he's one of Aussie's top brokers. And for us, we've known each other for years, and we saw, like, there's obviously a lot of podcasts about education, but we saw, I guess, a gap on how we thought would be a great way to educate people and break down topics and do things. So we launched a podcast together, it's a Property Investment Australia podcast, and it's going fantastic. We're clocking in on the sort of thousands of listens, and we've only been going for sort of about 3-4 months.
That's cool.
Probably
how many episodes you done?
So we've released 6 of them.
Okay.
We've got another one that'll come out. We release every fortnight, right? And that's just so we can, truthfully, just make sure we can deliver the content at the quality that we want. And then I'm sure we'll increase that over time. But releasing fortnightly, and we've had some just amazing feedback. We've had people who have, we had a few people who started sending us in feedback saying, like, hey, I've worked in the industry for like 10 years or 20 years or whatever, and the way that you guys are sort of breaking down some of these topics and talking about it is like some of the best stuff that we've heard on it. So, if you obviously Smart Property Investment is one amazing resource, but for people looking for another resource, Property Investment Australia podcast,
and just available wherever you get your podcast,
Spotify, Apple, all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Are you enjoying being a podcaster?
I am. I love it. I think, honestly,
who's the host? You or Will?
Co-host.
Okay,
co-host. Yeah. So it's just the two of us for now. I'm sure we'll bring on guests and stuff as we go. But
cool.
I don't know. I think I love it, and I chat property every day. Sometimes, genuinely, the hardest thing for me is sitting down and planning out the topics that we want to chat about, because there's so many things we can talk about. But it's what's going to be punchy? What are people going to find really topical? I think we've done a good job so far, but the last thing you want is to have that stale podcast where it's just like, it's the same thing every time.
Same old stuff.
One day it's sort of coloured in blue, the next is coloured in yellow, but it's always the same content. So, and that's why we're still sticking to fortnightly, because we really want to just deliver that hard-hitting, really brutal sort of content, really overlay the stories that we see in our job so people can really kind of identify with that and really sort of jump in to go, I heard that story. It's kind of my situation. That's really cool. Like, can I have a chat with you guys and see if maybe you can help us, sort of thing. So, it's awesome. I love it. It's fun.
Good. Yeah, nice. And Will does a lot of property investment finance, does he?
Yeah. Massive. Yeah. Like I said, he's literally he's an Aussie platinum broker, so he's one of their top loan writers. He's out in their Newtown office, so he's a platinum broker himself, and then the Newtown franchise, is also a platinum franchise. So they're doing massive numbers over there, and he's a wizard.
Yeah,
he's
an
absolute
wizard. My original mortgage broker was an Aussie mortgage broker.
Really?
Yeah, Ross Lachlan. He was number one Aussie broker for many, many years.
Wow.
And now he coaches mortgage brokers.
No way.
Yeah. $1 billion broker is his business for those mortgage brokers looking to do some coaching. Really good.
It's a good tagline. $1 billion broker.
$1 billion broker. But anyway, now so we spoke very briefly about interest rates and the landscape for investors at the moment from a taxation point of view and how the different states are operating. And, in many ways, some people would view it as shackles on property investors. Every time they try and get ahead, there's someone sitting there trying to change the rules and make it that little bit harder.
Yep.
In line with that is a rapidly changing and evolving market. Some markets are doing well, some less so. And a lot of the implications of rules and regulation around property investment is shaping the investability of certain places. I think of Victoria for the moment, who it's like they've just put up the gates and gone, no, we don't want no investors down here. Thank you very much, which in many ways might be an opportunity. So I want to sort of get into that. Why is there so much change happening right now?
I think the reason that there's so much change is that there's so many factors that are currently playing into property, the property market, as I always hate to call it, but then, the individual property markets, whether it's a suburb or sort of a slightly bigger area or a state. There are honestly that many things going on, and we'll obviously break a few of them down, but I think it's just so many competing interests right now that are really having an impact. And then I think on top of that, sentiment is being really, really impacted. And you just have to look at somewhere like Victoria to really understand that, because you're right, like the gates are up. And I think long term there's opportunity, but the problem is, and I look at myself, and the clients that I work with, I could buy a property for a client and say, hey, Victoria, I can probably almost promise you in like 10 years, you're going to be glad that you bought that property. But the reality is, if it takes 7 of those 10 to start seeing the growth, you've lost 10 years of being able to compound out your portfolio and really grow and build a portfolio. And maybe that property that you bought in New South Wales and probably you bought in Victoria, they're going to grow at the same rate of this next 10 years. But honestly, I don't think that's good enough, because you don't want it over the next 10 years. You need it to go faster at the start to then continue leveraging into more into more properties to build the portfolio. Because if you don't, you're going to have your mate next to you that does, and then you're going to get to that 10 or 20 year mark, and your first properties have proportionally grown the same amount, but old mate next to you's got half a dozen properties, and you got 1 or 2.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't understand this, and this is the utility of your money. And pretty much this monkey that everyone talks about, timing the market versus time in the market, and both of them work in parallel really effectively. Over a 10-year period, you may see the same capital growth at a linear level at the end of you. If you add a timestamp today and timestamp then, might have the same amount of capital growth, right? But you're not taking into consideration the utility of that time through there, and it's not static.
Exactly.
So if you lock up your dough, you're stuffed,
100%.
right? And this is the reason why most people own between 1 and 2 properties.
I got an example for you. So with our clients, we go and get a bank val done 6 months after the purchase, and then we go and we do it at 12 months, and then we do it sort of annually after that, right? There's sort of there's no real utility to take your good word. There's no real utility to go and do every single 6 months religiously, right? We just got our results for like 6 to 12 months, probably 6 and 12 months ago. We have one of our clients, and yes, this one is a bit of an outlier in such a short period of time, but it's certainly still quite the norm for us in this sort of ballpark. 6 months, property's up 35%.
It's crazy.
35%, right? Which off the top of my head, it was actually over 35%.
Did they do anything to it?
No, not one thing, right? It was that we bought a fantastic deal in a good location, and we let the area do all the heavy lifting by itself. So if they went and did some work, it obviously would have been even more.
So I could ask you where that is, but you won't tell me. But if you tell me a price point, I'm sure I could probably work it out.
It was so we bought it 6 months ago, and I think, oh God, if he's listening in, he'll probably misquote me on this one, but I think we bought it for like $540, maybe. Like 480 or 540, something like that, somewhere in that ballpark. But anyway, it meant that this guy, that we bought the property for, it was over 35%. It was around, it was over 35%. The actual return on that was something like 115,000 or something like that, right? And that's in 6 months. And that's what we're talking about, the utility. That's why it's so important that when you're building a portfolio, that you're building it in the right way, because he can go and grab all that money, pick it up,
essentially recycle
it straight into his second property or into his next property. It's crazy, and
on the basis that he meets serviceability requirements,
which he does. He's he was actually He's a rugby player. He's a
Okay.
pro rugby player.
Yeah, okay.
So
It's probably pocket change for him. His ashtray money.
So yeah, for him, like he's definitely got the serviceability, so that's no problem. And
Is he happy though? Like,
stoked, loved it. I mean,
130
it's,
grand, and you got to be careful because that's not normal. Like,
no, well, and like I said, that's like that number itself is quite significant. But you and I have talked about Atlas results before, right? Because like everybody knows, all the clients that we work with, all the people we chat to, and even everyone who listens, because I talk about it pretty much every time I come on. We religiously track the performance of our properties because that's the best thing I can hang my hat on as a professional is whether you like what I say, you don't, whether you agree with everything I say or you don't, whether, whatever that stuff is, I can point you to every single valuation on every single one of our properties.
Yeah.
And for us, like I can tell you, we're going to talk about it a bit later, but like over the last 12 months, we're averaging 21.5% annual growth on our properties.
I'm sure you're a bright bloke and you probably map this out on spreadsheets, or maybe Talva does this. But
all of the above.
So capital growth is good,
Yeah,
but it's the speed of the capital growth which is critical.
exactly.
Yeah, and that's a big deal, and a lot. It takes sometimes people a lot of time as property investors to actually understand what the speed component.
Yeah.
V equals U plus AT. Velocity
Yeah,
equals
there you go. I
initial
like that.
velocity
Yeah.
plus acceleration over time.
Yep.
Did I get my physics right?
Yep.
There you go.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that I could pull that out of my year 12 physics? And I'm sure there's some physicists out there. I'd really like to see a velocity equation put against it, because capital growth
Yeah.
is good,
100%.
but you want capital growth to be fast at all times.
Yeah.
I can't see at any point in time in your portfolio you don't want speeding capital growth. So you need to have a velocity equation applied to every investment decision that you make. V equals U plus AT. Use the physics formula. The time is critical.
Yeah.
And the initial price is important.
Yep.
Because if you buy under market value,
Yeah.
your initial price is actually lower than what the market is. So you're going to get the speed of growth to get to that point. And the speed of acceleration.
Yeah.
I like it.
100%. But you're so right. And I just want to come off the back of it because that's how you build a portfolio, right? The example we were talking about before, right? Like over 10 years, 20 years, a property grows proportionally the same, that's fine. You need that speed. And the thing is that if markets are going up, that's okay, right? Like, yeah, cool, you're going to have some growth. But you need to do better than that growth, right? And that's why, for us, like I said, we're averaging about 21.5% right now, average annual growth for this last 12-month period, right? The markets that we've bought within, so the actual locations we've bought, they've averaged just under 12.5, right? The national property market is just under 8.5, right? So our markets are already outperforming the national market by about 50%. And then within the markets that we're buying properties that are so significantly outperforming the performance of those locations. So if you think, right, that's basically if you just pick a random property, it's going to grow at that amount. We're outperforming by what? I'm just trying to do the quick math on it. It's like 9 point something. It's like 9%, right? That delta, that gap is what allows you to accelerate. And it's all good and well if you go, oh, cool, I bought in a property market, it went up 12%. But if the market itself only did 12%, you're only keeping pace with the average performance in that area. So the people who are really trying to construct that portfolio, and they're the people who we work with, are the ones who really want to go, if you want to buy one property, fine, we'll help you. But it's about trying to create that retirement level wealth, and then that generational level wealth is the second step. And you can't do that by just keeping pace with what everyone else is.
No, and you want to outperform the market, and this is the point. Welcome back, Phil Tarrant, chatting with Lachlan Vidler from Atlas Property Group. Now, I probably butchered that physics equation. So I know there's some very smart people that tune into this, and I would love to see someone actually use some of these physics formulas to give a sense for acceleration in property markets and comparative analysis of acceleration. So if someone can do that for me and send it through to me, I'd like to talk about it. Email the team editor@smartpropertyinvestment.com. You want some proper physics formulas and some examples, please, for those physicists out there. And I'm sure there's a professor there who could probably help me out with this stuff. But the point being, speed is key.
Yeah.
and comparative speed is key. So you want to be outperforming the market that you're operating within. That comes down to market identification. But then there's also dissecting markets to work out that you park your money in the markets that's going to have the greatest speed for growth.
100%.
That's where it gets hard. So one may rise at 12%, one may rise at 20%.
Exactly.
Which one? Choose one, right?
And I think that's the thing is that, especially in the early stages of a portfolio, right? Like I am a big believer, and probably every client I've ever worked with would be able to attest to this. I'm a big believer that you should never sell unless you need to, right? Because that's how you do create the wealth, is by building out and holding and holding and holding as long as you can. But you can also absolutely make the argument that if you've got some markets that are rapidly accelerating, and we're not talking mining towns because that's just ridiculous. Like I think
those days are sort of behind us.
Hopefully.
Especially there's not a place like Moranbah and
And I think as well, now that education is a lot more prevalent, like you've got podcasts, you've got better access to the internet, better access to data and information. I think that a lot of those sort of property spruikers that would go take people into a mining town, I think it's a lot harder for that to happen now. But I think if you're in a market that improves very, very rapidly, right, and there's good reasons for it, and you look at it and you're obviously investing because you believe that there is still a pretty good medium and long-term prospect, because I'm a fundamental believer in that, right? Because if not, you're effectively talking about a mining town or something that's got a cycle to it. And I'm not talking about just a regular property cycle. I'm talking about,
a like mining town cycle.
Yeah, like some sort of longevity cycle to it. There is nothing wrong as well with if you buy a few properties at the start of your journey, like for example, the example I gave of our client who's just done the plus 35 in 6 months. Yeah. He might end up turning around in 2 years and go, you know what? We're now up 80% or 100%. Realistically, maybe it's unlikely that for this property, it's going to have much more over, say, the next 6 years. And at that point, it is okay to go, let's rebalance the portfolio. We're going to sell, we'll take those funds, invest into something better because maybe it's not going to go forward. Or he could turn around and go, you know what? Or I guess it's more us since we're his buyer's agent partner, but we might turn around and go, you know what? No, we still believe that there's good long-term prospects. Now it tapers off. Now it just hits a pause. But then, we're sort of really expecting that in the next like 3 or 4 years, we're going to see another kick. So you should really keep that because you're going to hold that generation.
And you can use it as a cash cow, right? You can leverage it up with the equity.
That's it.
So you can still keep the property on the pretense that in time, as long as you can hold it from a cash flow point of view, you may get another kicker in 3-4 years and you just cannibalize the equity out of it, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Ready to pull out in the markets where you want. It might be a blue chip. And if you go from a $500,000 asset to, and I think about when I started building the smart property investment portfolio, you're buying houses in the western suburbs of Sydney for 300 odd grand, right? 350 grand less, which have all doubled and beyond. Some of them are sort of, tapping $1 million in value. Brilliant, refinance them multiple times, still hold them, and then sit around and wait. I've sold some of them off because they've pretty much done their long-term heavy lifting for me, and I've redeployed that money in markets where,
better upside,
better upsides, right? Yeah. So it's okay to transact, but how do you manufacture capital growth? Number one, you buy the right properties.
Yeah.
Number two, hopefully you get it as quickly as possible. But number three, you want the long-term capabilities, these suburbs, to keep growing because someone else wants to buy it in time and want to buy that upside, right? Someone at the start of their journey might be buying these rather than someone who's held the properties for some times. How much portfolio construction is going on at the moment? Are you working with people sort of 1 or 2 properties, or you sort of you got people in this transitional phase into sort of 3 to 6?
I reckon we're doing more like portfolio building activities now than we've ever done, and that's despite like the tightest finance conditions for probably the last 10 years. Property markets are some of the hardest to buy in for probably the last 10 years as well, just because we've got such a critical low level of stock around, let alone then you have to factor quality into that as well. Like we're seeing a lot of people. Like I'll give you an example. Right, we've got a client right now. He signed on to work with us about a couple of weeks ago, less than a month ago. Right, we build portfolio plans for all our clients because we really do back that portfolio building side. We don't just want to do one. We want to set you up to be able to buy multiple and build out for whatever your goal is. We got him signed on for one. We built his portfolio plan for him. He was tossing up whether they should buy an owner-occupier, right? So the context was one of the two in the marriage was going to get a housing allowance from work. And basically the allowance was going to be they could buy anywhere that they were living in at the time for the work because they just moved, and the company would cover stamp duty, right? The company was going to cover stamp duty.
Pretty handy.
Very handy, right?
I want to buy a $20 million house, thank you very much.
So on face value, it looked really good. When they came to us,
Yeah.
they said, look, we want to buy at least one property with you guys, but we've also got this other thing. Can you have a talk and maybe show us some scenarios where, what you think is best, right? And we unpacked it all, and we could show them through the numbers that they were going to be substantially better off by not taking advantage of that stamp duty exemption, not exemption, but the rebate, if you want to call it that, from the workplace. And if they went and redeployed all that money into investment properties, and then showed them sort of how we could do that, and then we haven't even bought the first property for them, and they've just signed on and paid us for the second one. So we're doing two at once for them, right?
Cool.
But that's an example of portfolio building. We're actually seeing a lot of that sort of stuff right now where people are going, this is the time to buy. And that's not just because I run an investment buyer's agency. It's the time to buy because as soon as some of these economic conditions improve, or probably more to the point, as soon as the sentiment of the people believes that it's about to improve, things are going to change. I've got an example for you. Earlier this year, everybody, and I think I showed on our last podcast, we're talking about it, everybody was under the assumption from the way the economic data was tracking that we were going to see 2 or 3 rate cuts this year, right? And we were expecting to see the first one almost around this time period, right? Probably not this meeting it's going to happen today, but the next one, right? That was where people were expecting the first one. The Westpac Consumer Sentiment Index was at some of the highest levels it's been at for the last, since COVID, right? And you could see that in the property market. More people were piling in than we've seen in a long time. Listings, whilst they're still the lowest that they've been in ages, started to tick up a little bit. Everything was looking really good, right? Then we saw some of that economic data change. The consumer index has dropped again. It's not the lowest level it's been, but it's down a little bit. Conversing with people that we see and other stuff, you can see that people are just, that fatigue that was occurring during that COVID period is back and sentiment's down.
Yeah.
So as soon as we start to see, we don't actually have to see the economics change. And that's the hard part, and why a lot of people won't be successful in this market is once the sentiment starts to change, that's all it takes. So as soon as the news starts to report, okay, the rate cuts are now probably 1 or 2 meetings away. Or inflation data's continue to go down. Or unemployment's rising, so that means that there's even less chance of a rate cut. Or, we saw about a month or two ago, some lenders were already starting to take rates down even without the rate cut coming. Once these factors start to come and the people believe it's going to happen, more people will pile in. That is in turn going to increase prices. Then when the actual cuts occur, and we're about to have the stage 3 tax cuts, which is going to add, some estimates are up to 5% back to people's borrowing, people are then going to be piling back in because they've actually got the tangible ability to do it.
Yeah.
It's I don't know how, more simply we can describe it than supply and demand. Demand is going to skyrocket. Supply is already turned down massively.
Yeah, and then this all has inflationary implications as well, right?
And
this is the big what if as we enter an election cycle. Now, talking about sort of portfolio construction, I'll sort of close with this question. But would you rather to build a portfolio for someone from scratch, or to come in where they've started and potentially evolve it and fix it, or be right at the back end of it and sort of at a sell down sort of phase? Where do you like operating the most?
Definitely the building. And the reason I say that is because just calling a spade, a lot of people buy a lot of shit properties, right? And it's not because they've tried to do the wrong thing, but they don't understand how to construct a portfolio. They don't understand then how to analyze the markets. And I mean, not to keep flogging a dead horse, but it's good numbers I'm proud of. For us lifetime averaging 20% annual capital growth, this year batting above that, doing 21.5%. People don't know how to do that, so they buy the wrong assets or they buy good assets at the wrong time. And then we have to try and unpick a portfolio, and they come with some sort of lofty goal that would have been achievable, but because they've taken wrong turns, it makes it really challenging to then get them there, right?
Yeah, and when people are building portfolios with you, how many of them sort of say to you, Lachlan, I'm making more money in capital growth every year than what I am working.
Heaps.
Yeah. Do people use that as a lens through which to view? And capital growth is only as
One piece.
good as what you do with it, right? And you either got to leave it there and just look at it and go, hey, look, I'm getting wealthier, and or you leverage it and continue to grow. But for a lot of people, PAYG type people who aren't sort of self-employed, this is their opportunity to be in business.
Yeah.
Doing this.
I mean, like, okay, so our long-term growth numbers and some of the numbers I've been talking about, if you actually translate that into dollar terms, it means in the first year alone, our clients are averaging, I think it's like $97,400 and a couple of dollars of capital growth, right?
Yeah.
I would say, especially when we're dealing with a couple, that most couples, there's obviously going to be one person who earns more. Often, the person who's earning less is earning less than that amount that we typically return
that's the
on
median.
average.
That's the median salary, like
Exactly right.
$95,000 in Australia.
Exactly right. So
essentially, you're giving one way that you're going from a 2-income household to a 3-income household because you got the other worker is your capital growth.
100%.
Yeah.
And you think
it's
that
just way
only
to frame it.
That only compounds, right? Oh, sorry. Those results only compound. But if you then take that and buy a second, that then is like, obviously it's not quite literally like this, but you can almost think of it as like 2 times that 94 number that I was just, 97 number that I was saying, so then suddenly you got that moving, and then suddenly people who, and we obviously, like I was saying before, that story, that was a pro rugby player, right? So we work with athletes, we work with, we've worked with some, celebrity type clients, we've worked with some, very wealthy business owner people, but the reality is a bulk of our clients are just everyday people. Mums, dads, teachers, tradies, just a white collar, regular accountant, regular everyday people who earn regular everyday money or amounts of money, but then through property, obviously through us as well, able to then deliver, like you said, a 3rd income, a 4th income, a 6th income.
Yeah.
And it allows them to have time with their kids, have a holiday.
And that's what it's all about, right? And
Absolutely.
also, back to our early point in the book in the chat, prepare for a future where potentially you might not want to work and not require the government to pay for your pension.
That's it.
I don't want to be on a pension. It's not enough money.
Me neither. Well, pension rates, like a couple right now, pension's about 52,000, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like,
That's what a pension is, 52 grand.
how much can you really do as a couple? Like, you get to that stage of life, you're obviously not gallivanting around the country doing certain things, but
You might be in your Toyota Land Cruiser towing a caravan, which for a lot of people is the dream.
yeah, it's simply just not enough money. And I think when you go and do things like combined property, you then have your employer paying you super. So you can obviously do things like buying property in super as well, which can significantly accelerate your journey. Like we do a lot of super purchasing for clients as well. But even if you didn't, even if you just left your super sitting there, I don't know, don't quote me on this, but I think if you added it up, the average person, who's had super paid their entire life, they'd probably end up just from their contributions, probably around the $200,000 to $300,000 mark. So by the time you account for investment returns, you're probably talking around the like $600,000 mark.
I think that's a big super balance.
You reckon?
Yeah.
You're right.
That's a big
But
super
people
balance.
starting from scratch, not accounting for inflation in that, just a raw number. I think
Eventually, but is that going to be enough in
that's the thing,
40
right?
years' time to retire on, right?
But if you combine that with property and then your own savings, now people who are going to be sitting on an age pension are now not going to be.
Well, it depends because no doubt the taxation rules will change around superannuation at some point in time. They'll get you in the end. They always get you.
They do.
They always get you.
certainly
But
do.
that said, look, you got to pay tax because someone needs to pay for stuff like NDIS and all these very important aspects of living in a country like Australia.
Yeah.
So you got to pay your tax.
Absolutely.
But these things you can't control. What you can control, what you do about it. If people want to chat with you guys and girls over at Atlas, what's the easiest way to find you?
So coming over, atlaspropertygroup.com.au, and you can come and have a chat with us. You can obviously see have a listen to the podcast, Property Investment Australia podcast, and then God, it feels like a bit of a roll here, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it?
And then we got Talva, so make
There's
sure you
also
jump
some
over.
steak knives.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So
Who was that guy? Remember him?
It's-
Tim. What's his name? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
So, but yeah, jump on over to Talva as well. So tlvr.com.au, and you can look at how your investment portfolio is performing and try and get yourself towards that second or the third or the fourth. And
Very cool.
so yeah,
Nice one. Well, thanks, Lachlan. Keep up the good work with PIPA as well. It's important work. You know, that's all. It's a voluntary position for you to sit on the board there with some other like-minded property professionals, including Nicola McDougall, who's the chair.
Yep.
She's doing a great job. She's
Fantastic job.
highly invested in that. So keep up the good work there. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Remember, go and check out Lachlan over at atlaspropertygroup.com.au. More info around property investment, smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Social media, find us Smart Property HQ or Smart Property Investment. You track us down. Please keep those reviews coming. We enjoy them wherever you're tuning into this podcast. We'll see you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.